Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran and today is a pretty good day because Outlaw Rogues finally got a brand new trait. Now depending how you look at traits and depending what you want out of them, I feel like some of you guys might be happy because of what I'm about to say about this trait, but some of you guys will definitely be disappointed because of the passive nature that this trait presents. So a brand new trait was finally added on patch 8.1. We actually knew about this trait for a while and what it was all about. I covered a lot of the rogue traits recently in one of my videos, but I never got to really take a look at this one. And since I'm an Outlaw Rogue main, I want to make a video dedicated just to this trait. I'm going to talk to you guys about any ways that I can think of cheesing it, my personal opinion where it could be used, and just to give you guys as much information as possible so you for yourselves can decide if this trait is looking like it's good and if it's looking like it's not that good. I'll also try to give you guys my honest opinions of what this trait represents, what I was expecting out of this trait versus what it ended up being in terms of its functionality. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So what is this trait, what does it read, and how can you utilize it overall? The trait is called Keep Your Wits About You. The effect itself reads, each time an attack blade flurries, which is your AoE ability, increase the chance for Sinister Strike to strike again by 2%. This effect stacks. Additional strikes of Sinister Strike deal 523 more damage. This effect stacks by trait, so the more traits you have, the more damage it does, but the trait stacking doesn't seem to increase the percent chance. Now there's a few moving parts, and at first I actually didn't realize what the hell this trait meant, so I'm going to give you guys my confused version of what I thought it meant, and then break down what exactly it means. At first I couldn't figure out if the damage happens only between Blade Flurry. Does Blade Flurry count as an ability cleaving something, or an ability trying to Blade Flurry or trying to cleave? So while you have Blade Flurry on, does it still count? Does it count against a single target? Is there a way you can kind of abuse it with playstyle? Could this replace Snake Eyes in some case? What does it mean additional strikes of Sinister Strike? Like, what were the stipulations? So the short version is every Sinister Strike extra, where you Sinister Strike and then you strike again, that second Sinister Strike is what's getting buffed. Which is kind of weird, but it's an interesting way of going about it. The percent chance itself does also seem to work as long as Blade Flurry is on. Doesn't matter the amount of targets, although it does seem to increase faster with more targets available because you're getting more auto attacks, you're cleaving a lot more enemies, so it does scale with a group of enemies. So you can technically stack it up to 100. Sinister Strike already starts with a flat 35% chance to have a secondary hit. So in a sense, you can actually stack it up to the point where you can have basically 100% extra Sinister Strike. Now this buff for extra percentage only maintains as long as Blade Flurry is up. So as long as it's there, you have it. As soon as Blade Flurry is gone, it's removed. So there's certain playstyles that you guys can come up with. Maybe you can use on single target. Of course, you can use it on AoE. Maybe there's certain talents that might make this work, so of course I want to test it all here. If anybody remembers the 2-button build for Outlaw that uses Slice and Dice and a bunch of Snake Eyes buff to use Slice and Dice to buff your next Sinister Strikes, they nerfed Snake Eyes pretty bad, so that playstyle for 2-button does not work. First thing I wanted to do is to see if I can test out this playstyle where I just spam a bunch of Sinister Strikes using a dagger main hand for that extra energy regen and see if just the sheer amount of Sinister Strikes can be enough to increase my damage. First of all, that did not seem to work, so I don't think we're going to have anything busted or crazy in terms of synergy like we used to have with Snake Eyes, which is kind of sad. The biggest problem is because Sinister Strike only secondary hits is worth the damage, so your first one doesn't do anything. So even if you're able to get a bunch of Sinister Strikes in, only your secondary hits are doing increased damage, and that is really not enough to maintain a proper DPS rotation. A couple of things that I did to make this work. First things first, I thought things like Skull and Crossbones as a buff might honestly be the best buff to make this work. You're getting a lot more Sinister Strike hits, and maybe you can use Blade Flurry for single target to increase that 35 baseline plus 30 from Skull and Crossbones plus a little bit from Blade Flurry into 100% guarantee pretty quickly. Maybe together with Adrenaline Rush you could have some really great burst. When it comes to my damage output, I'm not flashed and I don't have Lust available, so my damage is, and I'm just going to tell you guys, was a lot lower than what I'm normally getting on live servers with my original setup. So when it comes to trying to cheese this, I tried different buffs with Broadside, Skull and Crossbones. I feel like Skull and Crossbones and Broadside for some really Sinister Strike spammy build might work, but that's not where the damage came from. But that's all I could really think of off the bat when it comes to trying to find a way to cheese the playstyle. I even went as far as to use Dancing Steel, a talent that increases the duration and overall effectiveness of Blade Flurry when it comes to cleave, to see if I can somehow find a way to abuse this for single target. It doesn't seem that Blizzard wants us to do this, and it doesn't seem like I can find a way off the bat of how I can find a way to make this trait work. So that's the first thing I want to do, is to find a way if there's a way to break this trait, if there's some kind of a playstyle that we can use from before that we've had with Outlaw, like the 2-button playstyle, and find a way to just abuse it. It's pretty early in the patch, and I was thinking maybe there's potential for it. So now that we know we can't abuse it, how can we actually use this trait? Let's first start with the basics. First of all, I think this trait was designed for AoE, and that is obvious because of the Blade Flurry mechanic that it has, and the fact that if you're hitting a bunch of enemies around you with Blade Flurry, you are increasing that chance for secondary Sinister Strike higher and higher and higher. So the more chances you have for Sinister Strike to be stronger, and the more trait you have to buff that secondary Sinister Strike and damage, the more damage you can output. First of all, I found out that you can actually maintain pretty high DPS on 4 targets, so the more enemies you have, the more damage you will do. But on 4 targets, to maintain for me about 30-ish, 34, 36 if I'm actually going through my rotation, is not terrible. And this is me triple stacking this trait. But honestly, I found myself using my normal build for better damage. I feel like the crit playstyle that Outlaw brings, and the synergy you have with Blade Flurry and your other traits and your other playstyles, like any ability can cleave, so you don't really need any trait to make yourself do more damage. What I did find though that's comfortable is to have one of this trait in my playstyle when it comes to AoE. It actually does add a little bit extra damage, and of course the extra energy regen I get out of it because I'm using more swings, some more chances for my extra attacks to proc things and proc my mastery. It's not terrible when it's included with other traits, but I don't know if it's a dominant trait overall. Then I decided to try this trait when it comes to a single target, when it comes to trying to play out my rotation. And I actually found myself not really trying to pay attention to the playstyle, because every time I'm trying to go for some kind of Blade Flurry single target wombo combo, I'm losing out on damage. But whenever I don't try and I go back to my normal playstyle and I ignore this trait as if like I don't have it. Imagine you have some trait that doesn't change your playstyle at all, you actually do notice that your damage isn't that terrible. And when combined with other traits for single target, it just ends up being that supplementary trait that doesn't really add insane amounts of damage or playstyle change, but it is there, and you do notice it in your DPS. I think the best use I found for this trait is to either have one of them, but it really is kind of like a supporting role with a trait. You'll still have your dominant role playstyles like Ace Up Your Sleeve, Deadshot, and even Snake Eyes until it's going to get a nerf in patch 8.1, which you shouldn't really be using it that much. It feels like this trait doesn't actually do anything much for you. One thing I noticed though is my damage was definitely a lot more consistent. Once I'm getting a good buff, like for example a Broadside and a Shark buff, that means that Sinister Strike benefits from the Broadside for 20% more damage. And it also benefits from the Shark buff if it crits. I'm noticing my Sinister Strike's actually doing a little bit more damage with just one of this trait. It's almost like I have Snake Eyes, but I don't have to play a weird, crazy playstyle. It just kind of silently is hanging out there. But you do notice it when it comes to your damage charts, and it felt kind of comfortable to play. It feels like I'm not really having to play around the trait, but it is functioning in the background. So if you're a fan of a trait that actually changes your playstyle, you're probably not going to like this. But if you want a trait that actually is a damage increase that has versatility, I feel like this is where this trait actually benefits in. The most that I could do for this trait in order to give it a playstyle is by stacking 2 of this trait. I decided maybe 3 will be overkill, and if I'm not getting the procs, then it's not worth. But when I put on 2 of this trait and I get a decent roll and I'm just playing my normal rotation, trying to go for a grand melee, I guess in this situation I would be going for a Skull and Crossbones because it would benefit more my crit buff and any 2 buff. I'm actually noticing my damage being pretty high. Again though, this is not simmed information, this is really just me telling you guys what I experienced. I'm not running flasks, I'm not really running a whole raid setup, I don't have Bloodlust available, which you should try to have available if you're trying to test your damage seriously on a training dummy. But what I wanted to do is to hit a training dummy and play the playstyle kind of like how I would on live servers to see if there's any major difference. I did notice that this trait is passively just doing its stuff and I'm doing a little bit more damage. And it's actually pretty good for single target alone without having to go for some kind of a Blade Flurry flick playstyle. One thing I noticed though, it makes the idea that Weapon Master ends up being a lot more interesting. Most Outlaw rogues are running quick draw, which gives your pistol shots procs, more combo points and more damage, but Weapon Master gives you a slightly higher chance for your Sinister Strike to hit again, which kind of synergizes somewhat okayish in this build. It gives you about a 45% chance to get a secondary hit, which is as close to 50 as you can get. And Pistol Shot becomes a weird filler ability, and I'm not quite sure what to do with it, but I kind of like this playstyle, and I was actually genuinely surprised that this trait actually has some bare bones damage attached to it, even if you're not trying to find a way to kind of scamaz it. I don't know how I feel. I really was expecting for this trait to be something crazy, something insane, and I was hoping to have some kind of a huge playstyle change with it, some way to abuse it. It just seems to be the smallest tweak that makes a talent like Weapon Master actually viable, and it's so passive, but it's kind of effective. What I also kind of like about it is the AoE cleave capability. Not like Outlaw really needed it, but it just makes this trait versatile and even more interesting. It's almost like they balanced it out as a decent single target and then wanted for it to have a little bit extra uniqueness to AoE, but not enough to overtake other traits. So in a way, I guess if you wanted a brand new trait or more chances for decent traits on your gear, I guess Blizzard accomplished that. But they didn't really do what I wanted them to do, which is add a new trait that actually changes your gameplay. And you can kind of call me a stickler for it. I really wanted for Blizzard to make some brand new traits where you can just do crazy things with them in terms of actual gameplay changes. I even like some of the changes they've done to a spec like Subtlety, for example, where they changed some of their traits to add a little bit extra to it, like First Dance becoming more of a combo point generation and haste, but the combo point generation is nice rather than a crit chance for certain key abilities. It changes the playstyle even a little bit, and I was really hoping this would be something crazy, something new. It's a passive that's not a terrible trait, but honestly I was kind of hoping that they would move on towards more active traits, a lot like Snake Eyes, the original, not the nerf version in patch 8.1, that actually changed the rotation and playstyle and your thought process about like how do you use your combat buffs, how do you use your rerolls and such. Anyway guys, this is all I have for you for this trait. Overall, Blizzard did make a decent trade that people I think will be pretty happy to get. You don't really need to change your playstyle, and I guess you can use a talent of Weapon Master if you want to try a little bit extra single target if you do have more than one of this trait, like a 2. But I wouldn't really recommend a 3. I think a 2 is a nice sweet number, but a 1 is just fine, where you just kind of keep it passively in the background and you focus on other traits to change and dictate your playstyle. So I guess we shouldn't be all that upset. With the brand new changes coming up in patch 8.1, where they're adding an extra ring of abilities, I think it would be kind of nice to have this trait as an extra damage bonus, especially with how it functions for AoE. That would be kind of cool, even though Outlaw doesn't really need any help in AoE. I think we do just fine in pure AoE damage because of the way we were designed. I feel like we were just so well put together, but I guess it's alright. I don't know, I'm a little conflicted. I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think about this brand new trait? Do you think it's any good, or would you rather have wanted something better than this? Thank you guys so much for watching. This is my first take a look at the trait. If any more traits come out in the future, I'll be sure to cover them, so subscribe to the channel if you guys want to do that. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, or if you actually like this trait. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see all of you guys in another video.